Good morning, folks. Hope everyone is doing well today. Welcome back in for another episode of Logos and Machine, where UIW explores AI education in the human future. I'm Taylor Collins. I'm joined today by Dustin Hardwick. And I am really excited for this episode because today we get to nerd out about economics. For those of y'all who don't know, my background is in economics. That's why I'm a PhD at the University of Houston, trained as a macroeconomist. And so when we start looking at what AI is doing to our economic systems, some warning signs go up, and it gets me really excited to talk about what's happening. So hopefully we don't go too far into nerd territory. I'm going to rely on Dustin to keep us grounded if we ever start to venture off in that direction. But I think what we have today is still something that everyone is going to enjoy, because at the end of the day, everyone cares how much your grocery bill is. And we're going to be talking about why that's going to be a harder and harder thing to predict, to get a handle on, to have any control over. So just as a little bit of a preview to what we're going to be talking about today, there was a very interesting report that came out in December 2025 from Consumer Reports that looked at Instacart. Instacart being an online shopping platform that helps people buy groceries. And what they found was that the different users using the app at the exact same time, buying the exact same good, could be charged as much as a 23% difference in the items they were purchasing. What this resulted in was as many as $1,200 of increased cost per year, depending on the household. So just a little introductory thought for all of us as we decide whether or not we want to stick around for an episode about economics. Would you be upset if your grocery bill went up by $1,200 a month, not because of anything you did or because of any change in your behavior, but just because an algorithm decided you would be willing to pay it? Because that is the future that we're potentially moving ourselves towards. So that's the sort of thing we'll get to talk about today. Before we hop too far into it, Dustin, I want kind of initial reaction. Had you heard about the Instacart story before? If you did at the time, or if now is the first time, what were your initial reactions when you kind of heard about this new pricing model?
Well, I think that I've heard similar types of things through Uber and DoorDash. The numbers being that far different, I don't think I recognized that they were 23% different and up to $1,200. Like when I think of kind of this pricing per person, I think there are small differences, not a quarter of the whole price of the goods.
Yeah.
So the magnitude has shocked me, and I know for myself that's a dystopian future that I don't want to have any part of. So I guess my questions are: that's a big difference. What are the factors that play into I'm getting charged some percentage up to 23% more than somebody else?
So it can be pretty wide ranging. At the end of the day, it comes down to what you're willing to pay. That is the core of what these algorithms are designed to do, is to figure out the maximum amount that each individual person is willing to pay and to charge that person as close as they possibly can to that overall cost. So just as an example, 23% might seem big, but if we put up against a counterfactual, how much would Bill Gates be willing to pay for toothpaste? Right? At some point, you could see a difference of 2,000% in how much I pay for toothpaste compared to Bill Gates, and it doesn't make him bat an eye. Right? So in theory, 23% could be the low end of what this becomes. We could see pretty drastic differences across the board because this functionally just comes down to how bad do you want something and how much are you willing to pay for it. Now, the biggest driver in that is obviously ability to pay. Right? I would love to make sure I'm always buying toothpaste, but at some point, if it becomes $100,000, I just don't have the ability to do that anymore. I'm going to have to find some seaweed or something, right? You have to go a different direction. But yeah, at the core of it, it is a personality profile built around each individual person to maximize or define the maximum amount that they're willing to pay for a good. So as we hear that, you use the word dystopia, and I agree that a future version of this could very much start to feel that direction. But before we go too far into the dystopia category, let's start with where we are and see why it's not necessarily a dystopian outcome depending on how we use this thing. So just as we kind of get started on this, what we're functionally talking about, everything that we've said up to this point, is just an application of the idea of price discrimination. So price discrimination at a foundational level is nothing more than charging different consumers different prices for the exact same good. All right? Price discrimination is just something where firms will change the price based on who's purchasing the product. Now we hear that and we immediately think, oh gosh, that's got to be horrible. One, because it's got discrimination in it, and we know that's pretty bad for everywhere else that it's applied. But interesting enough, in economics, price discrimination has not historically been seen as a bad thing. In a lot of examples, it's actually been something that has improved the efficiency of the markets and has helped consumers along the way. So here's just a classic example of that. Price discrimination includes senior citizen discounts at the movie theater. Right? I went to see Backrooms last week when I went to the movie. My ticket was $14. I looked up on the board, and a senior citizen ticket, 65 and older, would be a $12 price. Right? The basic idea there is you might have a larger percentage of that population who's operating on Social Security income, and so their income's not as large. And if they had to pay the full $14 price, they might get priced out of the market and can't go see the movie altogether. Right? By offering that discount based on the lower average income group, you're able to expand the total sum of consumers who get access to the product. Right? So in that way, price discrimination can actually be something that's good for consumers. Anytime you see a coupon, anytime you see a military discount, anytime you see a bulk purchase discount, right? If you buy a dozen eggs, you pay 30 cents per egg. If you buy 18 eggs, you pay 25 cents per egg. That's price discrimination, right? It's discrimination on the volume that you're purchasing. So all of this is to say is the future we're talking about is an extrapolation and a growth path off of something that already we've accepted, and it makes a lot of sense. And in some ways, it really helps consumers. Now, the specific version of price discrimination that we're discussing is what we call personalized pricing. I guess I should be a little more careful. It's what economists call first-degree price discrimination. Corporations started calling it personalized pricing because that sounds a little more friendly and a little less scary. But first-degree price discrimination or personalized pricing is exactly what we said. It's figuring out the maximum willingness to pay of every individual consumer and person by person going as close as you possibly can to that maximum willingness to pay for their price. So just give us a little bit of check here, Dustin. I'm throwing a lot of econ terms out here pretty quickly. As the non-economist in the group, are we okay on the foundations we're working from?
No, I think that walking through that was really helpful. I mean, I think I immediately went to the bad part of price discrimination without really recognizing the discounts given for the various reasons that you stated are another reason for that. So that kind of reframed where we're at here. So I'm following.
Yeah, if I can, I'll put a little more precision. I'll just put some numbers because we're economists. We like to put numbers on everything. So let's do a very simple example. Let's say we've got a bookstore. They've got a book available for sale. You've got 3 people who want to buy it. Say it's a book about AI in the economy. So I really want to buy it. Right? That's right at my wheelhouse. So I'm willing to pay $30 for the book. Right? I would absolutely love to purchase it. You're interested in AI, sure. Maybe economics not as interesting to you as it is me. I know you still got an interest, but maybe you're willing to pay $20 for the book. And maybe we've got a student who is really interested. They'd like to read it, but they're operating on a part-time salary. They just don't have a good income, so they're only willing to pay $10 for the book. The way markets have historically worked is firms are looking out there at all the consumers. They're thinking, okay, how much does it cost me to make this book? It cost me $8. Okay, what price can I charge where I can maximize my profit across these 3 different consumers? So maybe the firm says, okay, for an $8 book to produce, I'll sell it for $15. Right? If they sell the book to everyone for $15, I'm willing to pay $30. I pay $15. We call that difference my consumer surplus. My consumer surplus is the extra value I get above and beyond the cost of production. I got $15 worth of surplus because I was willing to pay twice what the book actually cost. You got $5 of surplus. You were willing to pay $20. You actually paid $15. The 2 of us together extracted $20 worth of value out of that market. The firm extracted $14 worth of profit out of that market. They made the book for $8 a piece. They sold 2 books at $15 a piece. At $7 each, they made $14 worth of profit. And that's really the core of what markets are designed to do. The good version of markets. I know markets get a lot of hate these days, and for some good reason, some of them sometimes go off the rails. But they have been an enormously valuable tool for society when they work well, because at their core level, what they're designed to do is distribute value between consumers and producers. Right? Our example showed this framework where consumers get $20 worth of total value in addition to buying these books, and producers get $14 of value. It balances our desire to consume against their ability to produce. Well, now let's very quickly expand it to a very simple level of price discrimination, the sort we're familiar with, a student discount. Right? Students aren't able to pay as much for a book, so the bookstore says anyone who's a student can buy this book for $9 instead of $10. Right? What we've done is this price discrimination has increased the number of people buying the book from the 2 of us now to the 3 of us. We have more diffusion of this product across the economy. In addition, the student is getting some surplus. They were willing to pay 10. They actually paid 9. So total surplus between the 3 of us has gone up. Consumers have benefited as a whole, and the firm is making more profit. On that last book, they made it for 8. They sold it for 9. They made another dollar of profit as well. So in that price discrimination, the consumers win, surplus has gone up. The firm wins, profit has gone up, society as a whole wins. We've disseminated the information in this book more widely, right? Price discrimination can create a true win-win-win across the entire economic spectrum. Now, that's a little different than if we did perfect price discrimination. So perfect price discrimination will say, now we're all going to pay a different price. The student's still paying 9, but you're going to pay 19 and I'm going to pay 29. I was willing to pay 30, so I'll still buy it. You were willing to pay 20, so you would still buy it. But you, me, and the student all get $1 of surplus apiece. The firm gets $33 of profit. And that's the core concern about perfect price discrimination. At its core, it is a value transfer project. It is something that makes markets more and more valuable for producers and less valuable for consumers. Now, I will put the one caveat that the upside to that is it still increases access, right? In economics, everything has a trade-off. And even in something as good for the firm as perfect price discrimination, the value for broader society is it's going to increase access to products for people. People who traditionally were unable to afford a good, the student in our original example, under perfect price discrimination, the firm can lower the price for them to bring them into the marketplace, right? So we see a genuine increase in market access. That's the upside. The downside is we also see a genuine increase in market power, right? We see the firm consolidating all of these gains from the marketplace. Instead of it being a balance between consumers and producers both benefiting, the overwhelming majority of the benefit goes to the producer side. And this is something that we, as economists, my field, needs to be really careful about. This is something Leo was warning us about in his encyclical, specifically about the warning of not over-embracing metrics like efficiency and profit as the end result of whether or not a market is working, right? In the example where personalized pricing was in place, an economist would call that more efficient than in the example where only you and me purchased the good, right? The economist would look at that and say, the market's in a better position having personalized pricing in place than it is if only Taylor and Dustin bought it and the consumer was the third consumer was priced out altogether. That's the efficiency framework that if we embrace fully, we could start seeing ourselves go down some pretty dark paths in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see both sides of it. I think one thing that's bothering me a little bit is the person selling the goods has more information on us than we do on them. So it's a one-sided optimization, I guess. I don't know if that's a correct word here.
The word the economists would use would be asymmetric information. And it's worth noting, there are a few foundational requirements that we need to have in order for markets to be efficient, in order for them to generate good social outcomes of the sort we want to see. Symmetric information is one of them. There can't be a fundamental difference in the understanding what the value proposition is if we're going to have any argument that the market is delivering the value we want it to see.
Yeah, so that's just the one thing is that if this was truly fair, and that's never going to happen, I guess, we would know what their minimum price that they'll be willing to sell it as, or some approximation of that. And that gray area would be where the decisions would come out.
So yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. There's I'm sure we'll talk about different policies of what we can do about this in the future. But one of the things that's being tried right now, New York just passed a law that we called it the Algorithmic Pricing Transparency Act, I think it was, or a Pricing Disclosure Act, something along those lines. But basically, it requires firms, if they're going to use algorithmic pricing for a person-by-person difference, to at a minimum disclose that that's how they set their price. And I do think that's something worth thinking about. If we're going through this process of trying to purchase a good that we're interested in, we say, okay, I found the price good I want to purchase. I'm going all the way through. I'm at the submit screen where I just have to put in my credit card information. And then there's a little disclaimer down at the bottom. Note, your price was determined by algorithmic pricing. Your price might be different from other consumers. Do we hit submit or not? Right? Do we go through on that? I know for a fact for me, there's going to be a piece of me that's a little upset about it. Just the nature of it. It's going to feel a little gut reaction. I don't know. At the same time, I know myself well enough that I put in the time, I did the research, I looked through this, I debate about product A, B, C, or D. I'm at the submission screen. It's just a button push away. Am I going to push it and just go through and accept it anyway? And I think that's going to be a very normal question for a lot of people in the future of, do I submit to this algorithmic pricing or not? Or do I go out and try to find someone who's going to stick to a single price across the entire consumer spectrum? And I genuinely don't know the answer to that. I think that's going to be a theme for a lot of our show across the next couple of years, is we don't know the answers to these things. But there's going to be a real, I can speak for myself at least, there's going to be a psychological pull in both directions of impulse reject this, because you can see how it goes off the rails pretty quickly. But also it's going to have some convenience factor. It's going to take more time. It's going to take more effort in order to avoid it. And how much time do I want to spend shopping and buying things? I just want to go live my life. I want this to be easy, right? And which of those two things are going to win out? We'll have to see how far this goes before we can figure that out.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what I would do at that point. I guess that if I had decided, if the price that came about, even with that disclaimer, was in the ballpark of what I thought it should be, which I guess they would know, because that's the whole point of them having all the information, then it's more than likely that I would also hit submit. But there would be a part of me that maybe later on, I may go out to Reddit or whatever and see, what did everybody else pay for this exact same good? And maybe I didn't want to do that.
Well,
so that's part of it, right?
Yeah, I can certainly see a new market mechanism popping up there of, if this becomes widespread, if personalized pricing becomes the norm across our digital spaces, I would be very surprised if someone doesn't make a business of what price did you pay. And it is an app that specifically lets you track and view and compare to what other consumers are purchasing as well. And that would be the more market-based solution to the transparency problem compared to the government solution that New York is going for. Right? Is that going to be a norm in our future of the same way everyone has Apple Maps and the weather app on their phone? We've got a price comparison app to make sure we're not getting taken advantage of too much by one of these algorithms.
I also wonder if there's the secondary, we introduce a new middleman to the already market full of middlemen who doesn't have, that's more of a ghost shopper that may have a different price. And so they will buy it for me at that price and then charge me some percentage that's still below the thing. So I don't know. Maybe that's just totally going off on left field here, but
no, that's going to be a possibility. I guess it could be one of two different mechanisms. You could hire someone to do it full time for you, or more likely it'll be an agent. For folks who might not be familiar with the term agent yet, an agent's basically just an autonomous AI that you set out to do a particular task for you. So let's say we get to this future where firms are customizing the price of your good minute by minute, second by second, person by person, across the entire economic spectrum, right? There's a different price for your good when you sign on to look for flights and when you're ready to buy the flight 10 minutes later, right? Maybe even the longer you're looking at flights, the more and more your prices rise, because they decide, oh, he's really looking at this, he's really thinking about it, I'm going to make that price a little bit higher for him, right? So as those prices are changing more quickly than we can even respond to the price change, are we going to be forced into outsourcing our consumption decisions to another AI who can outpace the price of change of those price differences? So that's the sort of outcome that I get when we talk about dystopia at the beginning. That's the dystopia to me, right? The dystopia is you've got a team of AI agents that the firm is putting into place to maximize every single dollar they can get out of you, while you employ an AI agent to try to beat the team of AI agents that the firm is using. At which point the human is completely removed from the equation here. Right. And that's our whole concern with the show, is we want to preserve a future where humanity is centered. If we're not careful with this technology, it's pretty easy to see how we functionally end up paying a human tax for everything that we do without the AI agent. Right. If the whole point is that I want to go buy an airline flight, it takes me 15 minutes to look up flights. The longer I look, the higher the price goes. So me doing it myself means I'm inevitably going to pay a higher price than if an agent does it for me instantaneously. Then either I choose to submit my control over my purchasing decisions to this AI mechanism, or I have to pay a higher price than everyone else does. It's functionally a tax on being human. And that's the sort of place that gets really scary for me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It would be very weird to think that I couldn't do any of the shopping on my own, and I have to basically pay to have, because these agents aren't going to come free. They're going to come with different tiers of the plan from Gemini or whomever is running agents at that point. So it's very weird to think that I am going to be paying somebody, an agent, to do all of my shopping because I can't do it myself. And there are people that enjoy shopping. So there's a tax on enjoyment for people that enjoy the process of that. So that's kind of weird to think that I won't be doing any of my own shopping. My agent will be trying to figure out the things that I need and I want, doing the bartering for me. And that if I did it, it would essentially be dark ages and I would be, paying quite a bit more.
Yeah.
That's, on one hand, I appreciate the efficiency of certain things, right, that I wouldn't want to think about. But if it took over all of shopping, I think that's something that doesn't sound like, again, I'm going to use the same word, it's sort of dystopian to think about.
Well, and I guess the point where we would try to find some optimism is I think you would have a lot of people agree with you, right? I don't think that reaction is an isolated one. And my assumption is, at least for the short term, for sure, like I think we're going to see a lot of social pushback against this personalized pricing dynamic. And as long as that social pushback keeps going, firms don't really have an incentive to embrace it. That was the result of the Instacart story, is within like a month of that story going public, Instacart stopped the practice. They were getting too much pushback both from the public and from government regulators saying, hey, people aren't happy about this. And because that pushback was there, they ultimately had to shut it down. The question is going to be, as we get more and more comfortable with agents and AI and moving prices and all the things that come with this high technology world that we're building, is that impulse going to wane, right? Is that gut reaction pushback going to start to fade a little bit as one step more and one step more and one step more starts to kind of numb us to that reality a little bit? It's one thing when you've got one company getting caught to do this for the first time. Yeah, everyone can rally around the cause and say, stop doing it, and they'll stop. But what happens if all the companies are doing it? Are you going to revolt against the entirety of our economic system? That's a bigger task, right? That's a heavier thing to do. It's to whatever extent that we as consumers can continue to demand the human in our interactions, firms have an incentive to supply it. The question is just whether or not that demand continues.
Yeah, I think we've already turned over so much of our life to algorithms. Is this just an extension of that? Have we taken that? We trust our music library to an algorithm. We trust our rotation of shows to an algorithm. Is that kind of blind trust that had been developed over the past decade to a decade and a half, is that going to allow this transition to be smoother? I think it probably could. The other thing I was thinking as you were talking, you're talking about regulators and regulating the consumer and the producer. Where are they in the are they able to regulate agent to agent? Like that becomes fairly opaque, I believe.
Yeah, it would be very. If we've got a reality where firms are using agents to set prices and consumers are using agents to buy prices, then the only regulator is an agent to regulate the agents. Like, there's no way that a human mind can keep up with how fast those are moving. So the government would need their own agent in order to regulate it as well. Simpler regulations that you could argue for in theory, but that I think make it pretty tough to see the viability of this quickly. You could start just big picture. Let's do a ban on all price discrimination. Right? That's the most logical starting point. Is this is all a price discrimination problem? Let's get rid of it. I don't think that's viable for a couple of reasons. Number one, political pushback would be crazy. Like we said, price discrimination includes senior citizen discounts and student discounts and military discounts. Those are a lot of voting blocks. You're going to get really mad if someone says your prices are going to go up because I dictated that a firm can't give you a discount anymore. Right? So you can't ban price discrimination at a whole. And like I said at the beginning, we don't really want to. It's actually a good thing for markets in a lot of ways. So the next question is, can we go to the point of banning the personalized pricing? Just literally like the person by person all the way along. But even that would be tough for like car dealerships. You can argue that car dealerships do a version of first degree price discrimination, right? There's a manufacturer suggested retail price at MSRP. That's what they recommend the local retailers to sell the car for. But really, a car salesperson might have a $10,000 range that they're allowed to sell a car for from their boss. And what they're trying to do when they're talking to you, when they're understanding about your life, when they're trying to negotiate, they're trying to figure out the maximum amount you're willing to pay, right? If I want to go buy a car and someone who's making $500,000 a year want to go buy the exact same car, odds are that person's going to end up paying a little more for it because they're not going to spend as much time negotiating with the dealer to try to get the price down. I want that low price. That's an example of first-degree price discrimination. So even that starts to break down the market a little bit. Similarly, you could do like markets for life insurance, right? The way life insurance works is a firm is going to evaluate your risk level, and they're going to determine what monthly costs you need to pay for this insurance based on what your risk is. If we're saying we're getting rid of all price discrimination, are we going to functionally say insurance can't price their good on the basis of risk? Because if that's the case, insurance markets go away. That product doesn't make sense anymore once you remove that component. So just from a practical perspective, it's hard to regulate price discrimination at any level, even the extreme version of perfect. Even if you wanted to say, okay, you just can't go person by person. You've got to at least create bins of bin A, bin B, bin C, bin D, just separate consumers into bins. So there's at least like some categorization. But then what's to stop a firm from hypothetically creating 100 different bins or 1,000 bins? In which case you're functionally back to first degree price discrimination all the same. So it's really tough at the front end level to say price discrimination in any way, shape, or form is going to be mitigated by the government. It's just it's too fundamental for us to change prices for different consumers. It's something we're used to. It's something we're comfortable with. What we're not used to or comfortable with is the extreme version that we, for the first time, have the ability to implement. Right? I'm sure this is something firms have wanted to do for a long time, but for technical reasons, they haven't had the capacity. Now the capacity is there. We've built the capacity. Surveillance capitalism is the capacity, right? We've been giving them every piece of data there is about us for the last couple of decades. They purchased all of it. They have a lot of information about our purchasing behavior, about our consumer profiles, about what it is that's going to motivate us to buy something. All of those things have historically been way too much for any firm to actually act on person by person level. Like to sort through all of that and figure out person 163 is willing to pay $12 for the good, but 2,647 is willing to pay $13 for the good. Like you can't do that at a manual level. That's what AI is really good at. That's the pattern recognition that it's almost designed to do, of take these huge amounts of data, disentangle these really complex webs of interconnected pieces, and boil it down to a single number. How much is this person willing to pay for the product? And then we've obviously got our digital spaces where you can just change the product, right? It's a lot harder when you're actually going to the store, and they at least have to put the digital price tags to change it person by person. That at least takes a little bit of effort. You're buying on Amazon, it's just a click of a button. Right? There's nothing stopping that. So yeah, the capacity is there. We've built the capacity pretty freely without much pushback for the last couple of decades.
So if I'm taking this logic to the right direction, the end fix or the compromise has to come from us consumers, how we make purchases, even if it's to our agents. Or is there a I'm trying to find a silver lining here, or an outcome that sounds better than the next, and even my own logic is kind of getting stopped there in the middle of my train of thought.
Well, and I don't have the answer for you. Like that's the whole beast. The nature of this beast is it is a brand new problem that we've never had to tackle before. So I guess a couple things to think about at the subsidiarity level, of the smallest level that you can. What can we do for our very tiny pieces? I'll make a note on front, and those are not going to be enough. We'll have to work our way up. But at the very tiny pieces, I would focus on things like where I can. I would like to purchase from human scale sellers, right? I would like to focus on small businesses, local businesses, where it's accessible to me. It's not something everyone can do. I understand that. That's going to come with a price premium. But for me, as someone who just likes seeing humanity keep human, I would rather minimize the extent to which I willingly embrace algorithmic pricing vendors. Some of those will be impossible to get around. If I'm going to buy an airline ticket, there's no getting around that, right? That's the sort of market that's perfectly primed for this. But if I need to buy a can of tomato sauce, where I can, go into a local farmer's market to get something there instead of buying it from Amazon, it's one little small piece of making the demand for that sort of convenience a little bit less prevalent. I would say the other very small thing we can do, if nothing else, we're going to keep getting pushed this direction. And so, like, I want to be careful. I don't want to make anyone feel personally guilty if, like, you start finding yourself brought in by this and accepting this and making it part of your life. Like, it is not something that is fixable at an individual level. So guilt is not the reaction we're trying to elicit. What we do want to do is, at a minimum, as we start to make these transitions, we want to acknowledge the things that we're trading off. Right? Let's make sure we're not doing this blindly and without the active recognition of what we're getting for what we're giving up. And we'll say there's a good chance we do get something valuable. Like there's a viable possibility that what this gives us is a significant increase for a lot of people who have historically been priced out of markets to finally be able to afford goods that they want. That's a genuine value that we're not trying to hide from. We do want to make sure that at the individual level, we're acknowledging what we sacrifice, what we lose in that progression, right? And if we are AI consumers negotiating against AI sellers with an AI government agent intervening to make sure that that's done fairly, at what point is shopping still a human experience? At least knowing that that's what we're giving up, that that's the transition that we're undertaking, is something to kind of create an active pushback against it. So anyway, that's the small 10-year-own piece of the wall version. The bigger version, and something that maybe we didn't get to as much as Popely is encyclical, it's still viable, is that not every problem is solved at the individual level. Some require some level of collective action. This wouldn't be any different. Is the only chance for this to not swamp our markets is if a collective action outcome is going to be put in place. I don't know exactly what that is. Like you said, I come to the same problem. Every proposal is going to have some sort of roadblock that comes up in front of it. You can't ban price discrimination of almost any form. You can maybe put a limit on AI-driven price discrimination, right? It'd be one thing to say that you can't do first-degree price discrimination and then car dealerships are really in a lot of trouble. It's another thing to say you can't use an AI algorithm to do that for you, right? So that is maybe one possibility, is to kind of minimize or try to focus in on the specific AI application component. Even that is going to come with cost, because like we said, if you can't use the AI to figure out the maximum willingness to pay for every customer, then you can't give the lower price goods to all the people who have historically been priced out of the marketplace, right? So we're still losing something there. So then the other option would be on the data side, on the input side. Right, the whole thing that makes these AI so powerful and gives them this possibility of hypothetically knowing the maximum willingness to pay for every single person for every single good is we've given them all of our data. That we've allowed the large scale purchase of everything we do. How many of our TVs have ambient listening devices that we don't even know are constantly recording everything we talk about in our household? I tell my wife that I really like a particular brand of honey ham, and all of a sudden an ambient listening device has picked that up, and now all of the grocery retailers know that I'm willing to pay more for this particular brand, right? So whatever we can do to protect our privacy, protect our data on the front end, it makes these algorithms less efficient, less effective at actually being able to predict what our maximum willingness to pay is, and that's going to minimize some of the profit creep, the profit extraction that firms are able to take out of the market. So I very much want people to continue to work on this in the future, and I hope there's some sort of action that says you can't do this and we're just going to stick with it and that's an easy solution. But I'm skeptical to think that's going to be viable. I think the more viable option is going to be on front-end protections and minimizing the extent to which our data, our information, the core information on what makes us us and what drives us to the decisions we make. I hope we get to a point where that's more protected and it's less monetizable and it's less of something that firms can use to figure out the best way to extract every dollar of profit out of us that they can.
I think there's some precedence for that. I think the EU has some different data privacy laws that could be modified and maybe have some relevance here. I also wonder if the policy is that is there a hybrid policy where the sellers can't use individual data as much as aggregate data, and where, I think that kind of gets back to your tier, and then the problems arise where how do you break it up? But
yeah, there's a possibility. I mean, there is precedent that firms have to use metadata for certain actions instead of being able to use individual level data. So it's a possibility. It would be very difficult to regulate in practice. It would take a very big and expansive government apparatus to be able to do that. That's going to be a couple of years away before we can get that sort of collective movement to do it, because I don't think that's where politics are right now, of more government intervention in markets. Can understand why, but it's at a time where we're building the most powerful economic tool that we've ever created. The idea that there is so little capacity to oversee and to guide these tools, it's going to create a set of problems that's going to be difficult for us to manage. And I guess I want to conclude on this point is, I'm not someone who's against open markets. I'm an economist. We were trained that open markets are the right way to distribute value. I believe strongly that they have been one of the most powerful tools for uplifting people out of poverty that we have ever seen. The whole point of using the example that I started with is that markets require certain conditions to operate well, and AI is a different type of condition. right? And that's not to say that we have to get rid of markets, but we do have to find a new way to update our markets, to protect our markets, to implement our markets in a way that they can't be so easily exploited by people who have the asymmetric information advantage, right? Because without that, I mean, without the core foundation of there's some balance that markets generate, then the value proposition breaks down, right? The value of markets is not just efficiency. Efficiency is one really good thing that markets do, but that's not the whole story. The other value they have historically offered is some balance of value. Both consumers and users mutually benefit from the engagement in that marketplace. And we need to find some sort of framework to ensure that continues to exist with this new technology that very much does not guarantee that to be the norm. And so I think that's probably a pretty good point for us to wind down on is the whole point of this is that we're kind of building out this future where while we want is a human future in the age of AI, it's hard to see the human staying centered within these marketplaces, right? And that was one of the things that Leo explicitly warned us about in his encyclical for the last episode was if we overemphasize the importance of the historical metrics we've used of efficiency and of profit, that it's really easy for us to lose track of the human at the center of everything. And as a Catholic economist, that's what I don't want us to do, right? I want us to use our markets to uplift people as best we can, not as something to replace the human along the way. So, yeah, I think that's probably a good spot to wind down. Dustin, do you have any kind of final thoughts or takeaways from this episode?
Yes. So as somebody that's not an economist, I think this for me was a bit of a wake-up call on how personalized this pricing can be. And also kind of, I think it was a good review of the goods and bad about it. I think when we out in the media, it's all the negatives. So I think having a clearer picture of what it means on both the positive and the negative has been really important for me listening to this. It also makes me realize that our days of shopping the way we have for the last several decades are going to be radically changed. Not just because of the pricing, but the addition of agents working for us and against us, if to use that term, probably not exactly specific enough. The agent economy is going to change everything. So just being aware that this is coming down the pipeline is important for me. And it's going to change the way that I look at shopping. I think I will choose local more when I can. I may, and maybe ask my agent to find a local vendor that's within a certain percentage of the price of the online. That way I'm using the technology in a way that allows me to have a human interaction and a human shopping experience. So I think that that's a good take-home point for our listeners is if you're so inclined, think about places that you can shop local, shop with a human, maintain your own agency over the shopping to the degree that you can.
Yeah, no, I love that. Again, the whole ethos of the show is to center the human, and that starts with us. Just what decisions we're going to make. Do we default to efficiency? Do we default to cheap? Or are we willing to put in a little extra time, energy, effort, and yeah, sometimes money to keep the human in our interactions? For some people, that's going to be harder than others. And again, no judgment or any sort of guilt intended for people who just can't make that decision. But if you're in the position to try to support that local, support small business, I think that's just one little small piece of subsidiarity that each of us can push towards when the opportunity is there. So with that said, I really want to thank everyone for being with us today. We know how valuable your time is, so we're very grateful for you spending some of it here with us. If you enjoyed the episode, please do like, subscribe, and share this with other people. For a new show like ours, it's the best way to make sure that we can keep offering these episodes in the future. So thank you again for being with us. We look forward to being with you again soon, and y'all take care. All right, have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.